Welcome to Aroused, the podcast that teaches you how to reclaim your sexuality and how to significantly increase the passion and pleasure in your life. If you're determined to have a breakthrough in your love life, then this show is for you. I'm a relationship, dating, and sex expert, Samantha Pop, and I'm stoked to have you join me on this journey. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating review if you love this episode. Hello, my love, and welcome back to another episode. I am so excited that you are here, and okay, so today's topic is how to never be deceived by these sex lies. And this is such an important topic, not only to me, but to so many women that I know, that I've grown up with, because whether you have grown up as a Christian or not, you hear so many of these lies and myths told to you by adults. And today I'm here to debunk a bunch of those myths. So I am so excited to dive in. So let's get started. 13 different sex myths and lies that I'm going to go through with you today and help you feel empowered about making your decisions around sex and self-pleasure and making sure that you're choosing decisions that feel good to you, not based on what other people tell you and make you believe as truth when, it's really not. So the first one is that everything's a sin, especially masturbating. And no, this, I hear that a lot of this comes from men, especially, if anyone knows me, and if you don't, I went to a private Christian school in junior high, which was grades 7 to 9. And, I did hear this, everything was a sin and that you have to repent for everything that you do. And like masturbating, like especially was an awful sin. And it's like, okay. And depending what religion or faith that you follow, the person that's telling you these have never ever had sex. Like priests or whatever, they take this vow to God and they never have sex. And it's like, oh, well, this is a sin and you should never. And it's like, okay, coming from someone who has probably never done it, and you don't know that for sure, but I'm just like, that's hypocritical. Like for you to never have sex and to tell people, oh, you need to wait to be married. And it's like, from someone who's never had sex, you really shouldn't be telling people what is the right decision for them. And even I'm not here to tell you, hey, this is what you should do. I'm here to like guide you in making your own decisions. Because, a lot of the time my clients will come to me and be like, hey, I need advice. Like, what's the best decision? Like, is this good? Is this a bad decision? And I'm like, whoa, it's not always about what I think is the right and wrong decision. What do you feel? What do you think is the right decision? And this all comes down to masturbating and self-pleasure and, deciding when to actually first have sex. And with this whole myth, this lie that like masturbating is a sin, I didn't actually know I was doing it when I was doing it. Like that's the whole thing, is there's not enough education on self-pleasure for women. Like, there's pretty much the one way for men, and we all know what that is. So obviously I'm not going to go into the depths of self-pleasure for men, but everyone knows what men do to self-pleasure. And for women, there's so many different ways for us to do that, even when I first started doing it, I didn't actually know it because no one talked about it. And there wasn't a lot of education. And honestly, I had to go to the internet to find out a lot of things because the people in my life, I either didn't feel comfortable talking to them about it, or, I felt ashamed because that's the way that adults made me feel. And there's nothing wrong. So even when I was a Christian, so-called, like, I was a quote unquote Christian at the time, and I didn't see it. I didn't see self-pleasure as a sin. I'm like, if this is the way that my body was made, why am I feeling these things? Why am I feeling good when I self-pleasure? Why am I feeling, this climax or this orgasm? Like, why, if masturbating and self-pleasure wasn't made for us to feel good and to experience pleasure, why did we feel pleasure? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? So this completely debunks the whole thing that it's like, oh, well, masturbating's a sin. And it's like, well, we are made to touch ourselves and we are made to be curious. And, how many times have you, scratched down there and you've been curious, like, oh, like, what does it smell like? And this is another topic that I'm going to go into in another day in, really understanding your body and the way that your vagina smells. So that's a topic for a completely different day. But masturbating, it's all about men because, everyone knows what men do. But with women, no one ever talks about it. And I don't believe that it's a sin, even though I don't call myself a quote unquote Christian. Like, I still don't see it as a sin. Doesn't matter if you're married, if you're single, if you're a teenager. That's when I started, was when I was a teenager. And, there's nothing wrong with that. On to myth number 2, that watching porn is a sin. And this goes back to the whole thing saying that, humans are made to be curious. Like, I didn't receive the best sexual education here in Canada, and I'm not going to go into the depths of what it's like in other countries and different parts of the world, but there really wasn't a lot of education on it. And, I was curious and I'm like, what are these things? And so I was in Christian school and going to like youth group and stuff like that. And I was watching porn because I was so curious. I can't remember exactly the time that I was in junior high, but I know I was for sure in Christian school, and I was like watching porn because I was so curious. I'm like, how does this work? Like, what do people do? Because no one ever teaches you this as a woman. Like, there's a different situation when a father or that male role model in a boy's life, they have a conversation about it. But with women, I never had that. And I feel like there's this huge lack in education for women on self-pleasure and sex and, what it's actually like. And so I hid this for a long time because there was so much shame and guilt built around watching porn, and I felt like I couldn't go to anyone to talk about it. But the reality is that there's nothing wrong with being curious. And watching porn, no, I don't believe it's a sin from my point of view. And this is from my own opinion. You can have your own opinion on what you believe is right. That's why each person has their own values and beliefs. But, there's nothing wrong with being curious. And there is an unhealthy version of watching porn and, watching it too much and like only getting aroused and horny by watching porn. Like, there's an unhealthy version of it, yes, but I don't believe that it's wrong to watch porn to, build some sort of education, like what it's like and, like where it goes. Because even though they show you all these ridiculous pictures and these drawings of what it is, you don't actually really get to see what it is in person, unless you pretty much watch porn. And I'm not saying that you have to watch it to understand it, but for me, I needed that visual representation. Okay, like, is that exactly where it goes? Because, I barely even knew what my vagina was. Like, there was so much stigma and shame around exploring yourself that, I didn't know about my vagina at all. And I don't encourage anyone to grow up like that. Like, looking back, I'm like, you know what? I should have known how to insert a tampon correctly because I didn't even know my vagina correctly to do that. Like, that's how ridiculous it was. I want you to understand that I didn't even understand how to properly insert a tampon because I didn't have the education. These drawings didn't make sense to me. I needed to see an actual video or an actual picture of what it was to understand it. And no one could give me that because, porn is such a sin. But there was no video that showed you in an educational way that, okay, this is how things work. So onto myth number 3. Oh my gosh, I love this one. Having a purity ring will guarantee that you'll be pure until marriage. Okay, so guys, I had a purity ring when I was in junior high because I went to a private Christian school and a bunch of other girls, okay, not a bunch, but a couple other girls in my grade that I was friends with, they had purity rings and this was just a thing. And part of me wanted to do it because I wanted to feel accepted. I wanted to, jump on that mainstream boat of, oh, these girls my age and friends of mine are doing this, like I should do it too because I want to be in their group and I want to be accepted by them. Well, I was still watching porn and, figuring out self-pleasure, and they supposedly weren't. I'm not going to say if they were or not, but everyone in Christian school is pretty much like, yeah, we don't have sex, we don't have impure thoughts, we don't do this, and there was no talk about it even within the students really. And so I thought I was ready for a purity ring, and I was totally like, yeah, I'm going to stay pure until marriage until I wasn't, and everything changed because there was a moment in high school when I was in a public high school again. There was obviously no religion. Obviously there were groups within the school where there was like a Christian group and other groups of different religions and faiths, and that's totally okay. But I made it to a point where I was like, I'm not a Christian anymore. I don't acknowledge myself as one, and I think I'm ready to have sex. I was dating this boy and the moment that I decided, hey, I want to do this or I'm interested in doing this, the whole reason behind my purity ring went out the window because that old version of me was like, yeah, I'm so ready to be pure and like I'm gonna wait till marriage. And then this new version of me is like, I don't believe that anymore. And that's the thing about humans is, yes, we're curious and we're always going to evolve and change. Some people are like, oh, you always stayed the same. And it's like, no, not in my situation. I literally went from being in junior high a couple years earlier, being like, yeah, I'm going to stay pure forever, to when I was like 15 or 16 and, starting to think about sex. And it's like, oh, this is something, that I'm interested in. And it wasn't anything that was peer pressured. It was my own choice, which, yes, I felt very empowered about making my own choice. But after that, like, it made no difference with with the fact that I had a purity ring. It was just a physical ring. There was nothing attached to it anymore. And so it won't save you, even if you decide, hey, I want a purity ring, because your values can always change. And trying to make you wait to make a decision isn't helpful in any stance for someone to be like, oh, you need to wait to do this because you're going to change your mind. And yes, I believe that we can change our mind in the future about certain things and look back on our life and be like, yeah, you know what? I probably would have made a different decision if I was back in that with the views and experience that I have now. But you can only make that decision for yourself. And, it goes to be the same thing with the legal drinking age. When, depending where you live, if you have to be 18 or 19 in different parts of Canada or 21 in the US, that you have to be that certain age to drink and enjoy alcohol. And, how many kids have I known have drank at home with their parents, for the first time, or, they've stolen alcohol from their parents and they take it to a sleepover and they try drinking for the first time. And, it's not like when you become a certain age or when you get married, then, everything's going to be amazing and then you can enjoy everything. People that tell you to do that probably have their own insecurities and decisions that they made that, they probably regret. And, I'm not saying that you have to have sex before you get married. Don't get me wrong. There are some people that do that and they only have sex with one person their entire life, and that works for them. I know a couple people like that waited until they were married and had sex, and they're very happy. But it doesn't work out for everyone like that. And I believe that if I decided to marry my first boyfriend that I was dating and had sex with, I'd probably be very miserable right now looking back at that old part of my life. If I decided to marry that person, because we did talk about being engaged. We were together for 2 years, even though I was a high school student. You get to make the choice on when you want to have sex. No one can say that like this is the right time for you to have sex or not. Like you get to make that choice for yourself. On to number 4. If a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, he is an abomination. This is an actual quote from the Bible that I found because, this goes all around the whole thing of like same-sex partners, and that sex is only for heterosexual people with, the quote-unquote right parts that they were born with, like at birth. I really hate this because it is becoming more known and accepted for people that are of different sexual orientations and whether they're transgender. And I'm not going to go into all the details because I don't know all of the terms. You can Google all the terms in the LGBTQ plus community and get more information about it. I'm not here to talk about all those things, but it doesn't matter what your gender, your sex, or your sexual orientation is. You can be with someone that you love. And for myself, I only felt ashamed to be interested in women because of the church. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I fully experimented and finally realized that all those butterflies meant all those years ago. Like I finally understood myself on an even better level, and I don't regret it at all. And this is not something that I put on my social media and tell the world every single day that, I'm bisexual, but it is a part of my identity. It is a part of who the authentic person that I am. And I live that authentically to who I am, which is what is most important. If you want to tell your friends and family, if you want to tell the world, go ahead, whatever feels good to you. I don't feel like I need to tell the world in order to be authentic to myself, and that's me. That's my story. Number 5, once you've had sex, you're no longer a virgin. And this is referring to, vaginal intercourse, vaginal sex. And it's like, okay, so as if you're only going to do that when you're experimenting and figuring out when you want to have sex, or, it's your wedding night, you're having sex for the first time. And it's like, okay, there's other versions. There's oral, there's anal. And, I honestly don't believe that one like vaginal sex intercourse event is what takes your virginity. Yes, there's the anatomical, like popping your cherry and losing your virginity. And yes, but at the same time, there's like inexperience and then there's experience. And when you haven't done any of those things, then yes, you're inexperienced. And the more that you experiment and explore and practice and do all the things, then you become more experienced. And, once you can only really decide like when technically like lost your virginity, not only physically, but emotionally, psychologically, because they make it seem as if it's only this physical aspect, which it's not, because, there's an emotional aspect to it that it's like, okay, I'm to a point a different person now. I've experienced sex. I've experienced this new thing in my life, and I'm different now. Because when you look back at it, and even when I look back at myself, I'm like, oh yeah, that little version of Sam, she was so different before she had sex. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, I definitely, acted a lot different after I did that. But the moment that, I started to fool around and gain more experience, then yes, I eventually did lose my virginity. But the first time I had sex, I don't know if it actually happened. And this is the whole thing, because, they tell you all the things. Oh, you're supposed to bleed and blah, 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 all the things. But I never bled. It was super painful. And I didn't actually know if I had lost my virginity. Like if that, that, just imagine that there's like this plastic thing in your vagina that you pretty much have to like break through with, a penis. And that's technically like losing your virginity. But I don't know if that actually happened. And how do you actually know that it's like, oh, this is the time? So it takes a couple different experiences for you to lose your virginity. And then you can decide, yes, I'm not a virgin anymore. I've lost my virginity and, I'm more experienced. So number 6, sex is for procreation, not for pleasure, not to have orgasms, not to enjoy. And seriously, when I first heard this, I literally almost fell off my chair because, looking back at all the things that I was taught and even hearing this again and all the things that I know now, I'm like, okay, so if sex was only created for procreation, then there wouldn't be any nerves in the vagina and on the penis to make you feel pleasure, to make you feel good. Like, come on. There's like 8,000 nerves just in the clitoris, and some quack at the church is telling you that sex is not made for pleasure. That's total BS. Oh, and hear this one too. In order to procreate, a man has to have an orgasm. They have to ejaculate sperm into like your vaginal canal to provide sperm to the egg. So it's like, okay, so if sex is only meant for procreation, then men wouldn't have orgasms when they ejaculate. Like, come on. These lies and myths just boggle my brain, because it's like, that makes literally no sense. If you know anything about the anatomy of the body, like that's just debunked right there. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a nurse or a doctor, and I know these things. So it's like, come on, like, let's be real. Number 7, sex is going to be amazing once you're married, and you should wait to be married to have sex. Another one that just makes me laugh, because the first time I had sex was one of the most uncomfortable events of my life. It hurt so bad and it did not feel good. And it's not going to feel any different once you're married. You're going to have, the same experience whether you decide to have sex at 18 when you're single or at 18 when you're married. Like, it's not going to make a difference on the actual experience and if you feel pain from it or not, because some women, they don't feel pain. Some women, they do. Some bleed, some don't. Like, every woman's experience is a little bit different. And that is what's so amazing about the human body and women ourselves is, we each have our own unique experience. So it's, I don't believe that two women are going to have the same experience when losing their virginity, whether it's just the emotions that they feel, the pain or lack of pain, or, feeling that it was the right decision. Like, every woman's going to have a different experience. And so sex is amazing when you get to know your body and what you actually like, what turns you on. Practice is what makes it better. The first time is pretty effing awful. Like, that's at least my experience, and a lot of other women and clients that I've talked to about it, they didn't have a great experience with it because there was a lot of pain. And, for men, I'm not even going to get into that whole discussion with them because, I'm not a man. I don't have a penis. I can't really talk about that experience unless I have a man come on the podcast and explain what it's like for them. Number 8, a woman must fulfill their husband's needs. No, just flat out no. Like, sex is a 2-person deal. Like, both people should feel fulfilled in their sex life, not just one. And I really hate how in the church they're like, oh, like, women need to do this and women need to do this for their husband and their partner. And it was like this, like, back in the 1950s, like, the woman did everything for the man, and that's the way that things were. I don't agree with that 100%. And especially with the fact that a woman must fulfill their husband's needs. Each person should fulfill each other's needs in the bedroom. And if one person's not feeling fulfilled, they need to have a conversation. This is a 2-way street. And, not one person should feel fulfilled in their sex life and the other person feels fucking miserable. No, that's no. 9, marriage is forever. You don't ever need to get a divorce. oh, I hate this one because, in the church, at least with Catholics or Christians or whatever they are, at least from this standpoint, because this is my experience, I don't know a ton about other faiths and religions and what their point of view on divorce is, but in at least Catholicism, like getting divorced was this like huge sin. Like you should never get divorced. You get married once and it doesn't matter what they do. You always stay married. That's wrong. That's encouraging abuse and so many other toxic things in a relationship. It's like, oh, no matter what they do, you need to stay married. No, if they're beating you, if they've cheated on you and they continue to do so or whatever it is, you don't need to stay with them. You don't need to stay with that toxic person. You need to stop accepting abuse in exchange for love or what you think is love. And this is ultimately encouraging toxic and abusive behavior that it's like, oh, doesn't matter what happens. You need to stick with them thick and thin. Not if they're abusing you. Not if they continue to cheat on you. Number 10, when you're married, you'll be able to fully express yourself sexually. No, that comes with experience. I had no experience when I started fooling around, and the guy I was with made me feel ashamed, embarrassed, and bad about the things that I liked and was wanting to try. And I was a virgin, and he wasn't. So like he had all this experience, and I didn't know. And I felt like he was pressuring me in certain ways, and that's wrong. Like all of those things was wrong, making me feel ashamed, embarrassed, bad. And it doesn't matter if you're a virgin or not. When it comes to your partner, if they want to try something, making them feel ashamed, embarrassed, and like making fun of them for it is the wrong way to go about it. The right person will never make you feel ashamed and embarrassed about what you want to try or things that you like. The more you have sex and experiment with both self-pleasure and sex with another person, you're then going to be able to fully express yourself sexually. Number 11, men and women can never be friends. It will lead to impure thoughts. And then, you're actually going to act out the full event. Okay, this is a huge lie. I look back at my university career and I had many male friends, and with a couple of them we would have adult sleepovers. And before you assume, we didn't have sex, just sleeping in the same bed, literally a sleepover, but adult version, like as adults. Nothing else ever went further. Being friends doesn't always mean it will lead to sex, so stop believing this lie that men and women can't be friends. I've also been friends with, my partner's friends and like never wanted to sleep with them, never wanted to do anything. Friendship doesn't always have to lead to temptation and to sex and to cheating on your partner. 12, women don't care about sex. Oh, and the ones that do, that have a high sex drive, are crazy. Oh, this is one thing that so many people were telling me, and it's like, oh, if you have a high sex drive, like there's something wrong with you. And this seriously just reminds me back to the asylum days when, men would be able to commit their wife to the asylum for having an opinion and all these ridiculous things. And yes, that is totally absurd. But my point is because men, some men may not have a high sex drive, they're making women feel bad about it by being like, oh, well, women, they shouldn't have a high sex drive because, I don't, or, we don't have such a high sex drive and like women shouldn't, like we should, and then they should fulfill our needs, going back to that other myth. And it's like, okay, this is not about you. This is about being in a relationship with someone and, both people feeling fulfilled. And, I was with men that didn't have a high sex drive. Theirs wasn't high, or they couldn't get it up when they wanted to, and hence had issues with that. Instead of owning their shit, they try to make me feel bad about wanting to have sex a lot because, I enjoyed it. I had a high sex drive and they didn't. But this is what men tell themselves and others to control their sex life, like with their partner potentially, and, even cover up their own insecurities. Because I do remember one, he pretty much told me, oh, like, I don't want to say yes to you all the time because, I want to control the sex life and make sure that you come back for more. And in my head, that was literally like, hey, that's so manipulative. And second of all, you don't care about my needs. You only care about yourself and you want to control our relationship. You want to manipulate it. That's wrong. And, he had his own issues that I'm not going to talk about because, as much as I like to spill the tea, there are certain things that, even though I'm not with him anymore, I'm not going to spill the tea on certain things because, I'm not a complete bitch all the time. Number 13, and this is like one of the most important ones. You choose who you're attracted to. Oh, I hate the church when it comes to stuff like this because they're like, oh, being gay is wrong. Blah, 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 blah. It just boggles my mind that it's like, oh, you choose who you're attracted to. And then you ask them, oh, did you choose to be attracted to women? Yes. And it's like, no, you actually didn't, because there is no choice in it. You were born, whatever soul you had in the body that you were created. But these emotions, they are real. They're valid. And by ignoring them isn't going to make them false and, disappear. When I was in private school and I was curious about my feelings towards women, it really wasn't a choice because, I had all these people telling me that homosexuality is a sin and you shouldn't like people of the same sex and all these things. So I didn't tell anyone. And I was ashamed because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get shunned by my school, by the church that I go to, and all these things. So for years I had these thoughts and no one around me that was gay or bi curious. And I felt like I couldn't go to anyone. And I never chose it. I would always look at women at the mall and be like, yeah, she's really beautiful. She's sexy. And I never really understood why I thought that because, my other girlfriends that I was with, they'd be like, why do you think that? She's just a woman. Yeah, she's pretty or whatever, but it's like, why do you think she's good looking? And they never understood that. So it was something that I had to hide for a long time, but until the moment that I experimented and actually had sex with a woman, it confirmed everything I ever questioned about my feelings. No, you don't ever choose who you're attracted to. And, I really hope that this episode has helped you unlearn some of the shit that you were taught growing up because, I just went through 13 different myths and lies that whether you've heard this from the church or just role models, adults in your life growing up, they're ultimately trying to manipulate and control your decisions for you, making you scared that it's like, oh, you choose who you're attracted to and scaring you into being like, oh, well, I like women or I'm a man and I like other men and it's like, no. Why can't you just accept who you are because you're amazing just the way that you are and it doesn't matter who you love, you're amazing. Taking away all these lies and myths and flipping the script, unlearning all this shit that these adults and role models have placed on you, it all comes down to you. What do you believe is the right decision for you? What feels good to you? Who cares what everyone else thinks? There's always going to be someone that has an opinion about you. And believe me, I have had my fair share of that, whether it's my own family members or friends of mine, and falling out with both versions, friends and family members, because, they didn't like who I was or they didn't agree with certain things that I did. And it's like, hey, that's fine. I'm living my life. You go live yours. So don't ever allow someone to manipulate you into making a decision because you are the only one that gets to make those decisions. So I hope this episode has empowered you to look back on some of the things that were told you when you were growing up about sex and self-pleasure and, making the decision on what's right for you. Because I'm going to repeat it again, that you are the only person on this planet that can make the right decision for yourself. No one else can do that. You are the only person walking in your own shoes, and hence you are the only person that can decide, hey, I want to have sex for the first time. I want to try self-pleasure for the first time. I want to try oral sex for the first time, or anal, or whatever it is. I'm starting with a lot of those, beginner type things, because eventually then you're going to be interested in other things, whether that's, things that are more kinky and role-playing, BDSM, those are higher on the spectrum that, so many people get super scared of, and it's start small. Don't overwhelm yourself. Make a decision on what feels good to you right now, because you never know what you're gonna make a decision on in the future. That's the future you and what they're going to take from past experience and education and knowledge in order to make that decision. Hey love, what was your golden nugget from today's episode? Let me know by tagging the Arouse Podcast on Facebook or Twitter. And don't forget to grab my latest freebie. Head to the show notes and get the link. If there's a topic you'd love for me to cover in my next episode, let me know by emailing samanthapopcoaching@gmail.com. I'll see you next time.